On a late autumn afternoon in Seattle, the rain had just softened to a drizzle around Lake Washington. The wind rustled through the old maple trees, carrying the scent of damp leaves and a sharp, encroaching chill. Inside the brightly lit mansion of the Rhodes family, I had just signed the divorce papers. It was in that moment I realized I had been living in the wrong house for nearly 6 years. My name is Leah Sutton. I am a 6-year-old architect. The man sitting across from me was Julian Rhodes, my now ex-husband, the CEO of Vanguard Architects. To his right was his mother, Eleanor Rhodes, the woman I once called Mom. And Julian's sister, Mila, was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. The divorce decree lay on the coffee table, the ink on our signatures, still wet. People think the moment of divorce is the most painful. It's not. The most painful moment is when you realize the person you once shared your life with is hoping you'll just disappear, clearing the way for them. Eleanor set her teacup down, the porcelain making a dry, brittle sound. The papers are signed. From now on, you are no longer a daughter-in-law of the Rhodes family. She continued, her words slow and cold. I expect you to pack your things and leave this house. Take your clothes and your personal documents. But as for company documents, blueprints, USB drives, or even a pen from the office, if you can't prove it's yours, you don't touch it. Mila snickered. That's right, Leah. Oh, I guess I should call you Miss Sutton now, shouldn't I? When you leave, try to live a decent life. Don't come crawling back to Julian for a handout in a few months. This isn't a charity. I looked at Julian. He sat on the edge of his chair, his eyes fixed on the marble floor. The gray shirt he wore was one I had picked out for him on our 4th wedding anniversary. Don't you have anything to say to your wife? I asked softly. Julian pursed his lips. Leah, Mom just wants things to be clear. Don't make it more dramatic than it needs to be. That was it. No apology. His mother was kicking me out of our home on a rainy night, and he called it being clear. Eleanor's face tightened. Don't you dare play the victim here. This family has not been unfair to you. You walked into the Rhodes house with nothing. You're lucky to be leaving on your own 2 feet. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. With nothing? I had stayed up until 3 a.m., finishing blueprints for her son's company. I had overlooked my name being erased from countless presentations. I had swallowed my tears when Julian insisted my project bonuses be tied up in a joint family trust that only he could authorize transfers from. Mila tilted her chin. Mom's right. If you're going, just go. And don't accidentally take anything. People who leave with nothing tend to have sticky fingers. Mila, stop, Julian said under his breath. But that stop wasn't to defend me. It was to prevent his sister's words from making the room uglier than it already was. I stood up and gathered the divorce papers into my bag. I understand. Eleanor smirked, thinking I had surrendered. I looked her straight in the eye, and this is the last time I will ever call you Mom. The room fell silent. Mila's head snapped up. Julian looked at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Eleanor froze for a beat, then her voice grew harsh. What did you just say? I didn't answer. Some things only need to be said once. I turned and walked up to the 3rd floor. Every step of the gleaming mahogany staircase held a memory of my touch from the day we renovated. My office was at the end of the hall. I locked the door. Below, Eleanor's voice echoed up. Mila, go up and see what she's taking. Don't let her walk off with company assets. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. They were afraid I would take a few of their papers, but the one thing that would truly cost them their sleep, they thought was still safely in their hands. I pushed aside a bookshelf against the wall, revealing a gray, wall-mounted safe. I placed my finger on the scanner and entered the combination my grandmother, Nana Rose, had made me memorize when she was still alive. With a quiet beep, the safe door opened. Inside, there was no gold, no jewelry, no stacks of cash for Eleanor to scream about my greed. I was never good at keeping valuables. What I was good at keeping were records. I took out a folder tied with a string, a small black hard drive, and an envelope containing an old photograph of my grandmother. In that folder were the original incorporation documents for Vanguard Architects, the copyright certificates for the initial drafts of the Riverbend Commons project, emails and photos of the blank papers I had been forced to sign, bank statements showing irregular cash flows, system access logs, and a list of contracts that showed signs of corruption. Each piece of paper was thin, but together, they were sharper than any knife. I was packing the files into my bag when a sharp knock came at the door. Leah, open up. My mom wants me to check on you. I opened the door. Mila stood there, her eyes immediately darting inside. What's taking so long? Are you planning to pack up the whole company? I looked at her. Don't worry, Mila. What I'm taking with me, you wouldn't understand the value of, even if you saw it. Mila's face flushed. Don't you take that tone with me. I'm not taking a tone, I'm just adjusting my language to reflect our new relationship. Starting today. I pulled my suitcase down to the living room. Eleanor immediately stood and demanded I open it. I placed the suitcase on the floor and unzipped it. Inside were just a few sets of clothes, my personal laptop, my identification, the photo of my grandmother, the hard drive, and the string-tied folder. Eleanor glanced at it and scoffed. I thought you were hiding something in that safe. Turns out it's just a bunch of useless paper. Mila lunged forward, reaching for the folder. I grabbed her wrist. Mila, this is my property. You have no right to touch it. What did you just call me? Mila. The name fell softly, but it was enough to make her flinch. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. Let her take the papers. It's probably just her tear-stained diary. I zipped up the suitcase. You're half right. I am taking memories with me. It's just that these memories don't smell like tears. Julian stepped forward, his voice low. Leah, do you really have to take it this far? I looked at him. Julian, from now on you should call me Miss Sutton. Being too familiar might give people the wrong idea that you still have some affection for me. Julian's face went pale. Eleanor gritted her teeth. Once you walk out that door, don't ever think you can come back. Just then, the soft sound of a car braking came from the driveway. Through the glass door, a black sedan had pulled up. The driver, dressed in a suit, stepped out and came to the door, bowing his head slightly. Miss Sutton, Mr. Arthur Vance's car is here. The atmosphere in the living room froze. Mr. Vance was a 10% shareholder in Vanguard, a man even Eleanor had to show a degree of respect to. Mila's eyes widened. Mr. Vance sent a car for you? Eleanor recovered faster, a cold smile on her face. So, you get divorced and then hire a luxury car to put on a show. How pathetic. I picked up my folder and pulled my suitcase toward the door. The rain had stopped, but the brick patio was still wet, the house lights reflecting in cold streaks on the puddles. I turned back to look at Eleanor one last time. Don't worry, I won't be coming back to ask for shelter. Then what will you come back for? She spat. I held the folder tighter against my chest. You'll find out tomorrow. The car door closed behind me, shutting out the sneers, the mockery, and the fading shouts of the Rhodes family. The car rolled away from the mansion. I didn't look back. The car moved slowly along the road bordering the lake. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still slick with water, the yellow streetlights stretching into long streaks on the window. I sat in the back, clutching the folder to my chest like a child rescued from a burning house. The driver said nothing, just quietly handed me a tissue. It was only then I realized my hands were shaking, not because I would miss that mansion, and certainly not because I was afraid of Eleanor. I was shaking because, after nearly 6 years of living in that house, for the first time, I was leaving without having to ask anyone's permission. The car turned off the main road, heading toward an older part of the city where Arthur Vance had his private office. I had thought he had sent the car to take me to a hotel, but the driver said, Mr. Vance is waiting for you at his office. He said that even if you're tired, you should still stop by for a moment. It was a place that taught me a valuable lesson. Just because someone extends a hand, don't immediately assume it's a life raft. Mr. Vance's office was in an old craftsman house on a tree-lined street in Capitol Hill. He was sitting behind his desk, wearing a gray sweater over a white-collared shirt. When I walked in, he stood up slowly. Sit down, Leah. The warmth in his voice made my throat tighten. For the entire afternoon at the Rhodes mansion, all I had heard was my name spoken with the coldness of a blade. He poured me some tea. What do you plan to do with that folder? I want to take back what belongs to me, I replied. Mr. Vance didn't seem surprised. What belongs to you is a powerful statement. To make others believe it, you have to prove ownership with documents, processes, and timelines, not with tears. I remained silent. His words were almost identical to what my lawyer, Mr. Franklin, had told me, but hearing them from Mr. Vance, they carried more weight. He had been a professor to both Julian and me. When Vanguard was founded, he contributed 10% of the capital, both as a supporter and as a balancing force. I took out the first set of documents and placed them on the table. These are the original incorporation papers. I hold 57%, Julian has 33%, and you have 10%. It includes the company bylaws, the shareholder ledger, and proof of capital contributions. Mr. Vance put on his glasses and flipped through the pages. I know about this. I signed off on it myself that day. I took out another photocopy. But Julian has a document claiming I transferred 14% of my shares to him. If they present this, Julian will have 47%, and I'll be left with 43%. If you stay neutral, I'll lose control." Mr. Vance looked up, his eyes no longer as gentle as before. "Are you saying that document is a forgery?" "Yes. And I have evidence showing my signature was lifted from blank pages I was pressured to sign." He stood up, walked over to a bookshelf, and took down a small wooden box containing a vintage fountain pen. "Leah, I'll ask you directly. Are you certain you never signed any share transfer agreement while you were married?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm certain. I never agreed to transfer my shares. If I had, I wouldn't have waited until I was thrown out of my own house to speak up." Mr. Vance nodded slowly but didn't smile. "I believe you are a careful person, but believing in someone and voting for them are two different things. I sent the car because I didn't want you thrown out on the street in the middle of the night. But when it comes to the company, I am not on your side, and I am not on Julian's side." He paused, speaking each word deliberately. "I am on the side of the evidence." His statement was both a blow and a wake-up call. I had hoped for at least one person to say they believed me unconditionally. But on reflection, Mr. Vance was right. A company cannot be saved by pity, and a person whose name has been erased cannot reclaim it with mere complaints. I took a deep breath. "Then give me some time. How long do I have?" 3 days. That's not long. Julian and his mother are not people who will sit still. Eleanor guards her son's reputation like her own life. She is capable of doing more than you can imagine. A faint, bitter smile touched my lips. I lived in that house for almost 6 years. I no longer underestimate them. For the first time that evening, Mr. Vance sighed. "You're like your grandmother in that respect." Nana Rose was poor, but her eyes were sharp. When she gave you the money for your initial investment, she told me, "I don't have a mansion to give my Leah, just a little clean money and a clean name. Please, be a witness for her." I bowed my head, my eyes stinging. It turned out my grandmother had been looking out for me in ways I hadn't even begun to understand. After leaving Mr. Vance's office, I had the driver take me to a small house in a quiet alley in West Seattle. I had bought it secretly with money from freelance design projects, completely separate from the Rhodes family and Vanguard. It was a modest, single-story house, with a small front yard filled with pots of rosemary. I opened the door. On my desk, a small lamp was still on, next to a framed photo of Nana Rose in a simple cotton dress. Alone in this small house, I felt more at peace than I ever did in that 4-story mansion full of people. I brewed a pot of ginger tea, changed out of my damp clothes, and spread the documents out on the table. The first folder, incorporation papers, shareholder ledger, capital contribution records, wire transfer confirmations, and the intellectual property valuation. The second, copyright certificates, initial sketches for the Riverbend Commons project, field survey journals, email exchanges, site photos, and time-stamped files. The third, the blank pages, photos I had taken before signing, clearly showing the living room table, the diamond tennis bracelet on Eleanor's wrist, the wall clock. Right below was the email I had sent to Mr. Franklin. The fourth, financials. Consulting contracts with a company owned by Eleanor's brother. Mila's inflated media expenses. Strange cash flows that moved through intermediaries and vanished like fish in a muddy pond. The final folder, system data. Access logs, edit histories, a list of everyone who had ever entered the original design directory. I was reviewing everything when my phone rang. It was Mr. Franklin, my lawyer. "Are you somewhere safe?" "Yes, I am. Don't post anything on social media. Don't answer strange numbers. Don't text Julian. From now on, every word you write can be taken out of context." I looked at the dark reflection in the window. "I understand." Mr. Franklin was quiet for a few seconds, then said, "Tomorrow, you'll meet with the developers. Remember, you are not there to tell a sob story. You are there to point out risks. Big business people aren't afraid of tears. They're afraid of forged signatures, dirty contracts, and flawed projects." I clutched the phone tightly. "Mr. Franklin, can I win?" He answered slowly, "You can win, but it won't be fast if you lose your temper. They've been building this stage for 6 years. You can't pull down the curtain with a single tug. You have to remove it one nail at a time." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the rain began to fall again, a soft patter on the roof. I picked up the photo of Nana Rose and placed it next to the folders. "Nana," I said softly. "They thought I walked out of that house with a pile of useless paper. I looked at the neatly organized stacks of documents before me. Tomorrow, I'll show them that sometimes, useless paper is all it takes to bring down a fraudulent stage. For several nights, I didn't sleep. The little house in West Seattle was so quiet, I could hear the rain tapping on the eaves. The ginger tea grew cold, its spicy scent still lingering on my tongue. Before me lay the neat stacks of files, and beside them, the old photo of Nana Rose. She wore a simple dress, her hair in a tidy bun, her eyes kind but sharp. People often say that old folks from the country aren't well read, but my Nana was different. She didn't have a high education, but life had taught her to read people better than many who sat in air-conditioned offices. I was born in a small town along a river in rural Ohio. My parents died in a car accident when I was too young to understand the concept of loss. I only remember that from the moment I could say Nana, the old shingled house by the river was my entire world. We were poor, but the house was always clean. The red brick patio was swept at dawn. A trellis of morning glories bloomed by the front door in the summer. The kitchen always smelled of wood smoke, baking bread, and pot roast slow cooking in a cast iron pot. On rainy days, Nana would make tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. The meals were simple, but even now, when I eat at fine dining restaurants, I still remember that comforting taste. Nana was a seamstress. She spent her days at an old sewing machine, her foot pumping the pedal steadily, her eyes focused on each stitch. On cold days, her hands would crack and bleed, staining the white fabric. I would cry, "Nana, please rest." She would smile and wipe her hands. "If I rest, how will I pay for your schooling?" Being poor isn't scary, Leah. What's scary is being poor and letting others own your mind. I didn't understand then. I only knew she was strict about my education. If I got a low grade, she wouldn't scold me much, just make me sit and correct my work until I understood. She used to say, "We don't have acres of land or a hidden fortune. All I can give you is your education. An education is a house no one can ever evict you from." It was only later, on the day Eleanor kicked me out of the Seattle mansion, that I felt the sting of those words like a needle. Some things the elderly say when you're young sound like wind in your ears. It takes a slap from life to realize every word lands exactly where it should. I came to Seattle to study architecture at the University of Washington with a cloth backpack, a few old clothes, and a bag of brownies Nana had wrapped in wax paper. My first dorm room was tiny, hot as an oven in the summer and cold as a cellar in the winter. I went to classes during the day and took on freelance rendering work at night. Sometimes I'd sit until 2 or 3 in the morning, my eyes burning, my hand numb from the mouse. But I didn't feel miserable. I believed I was on the right path. I loved houses with wide porches, with places for old people to sit and drink tea, with yards for children to run barefoot. My friends loved designing glass skyscrapers and gleaming shopping malls. I was fascinated by narrow alleys, old shingled roofs, the ancient trees in front of a community hall, the waterfronts behind old villages. Someone once teased me, "Leah, are you an architect or a museum curator?" I laughed. A house needs memories to have a soul. Otherwise, it's just a box to put people in. I met Julian Rhodes at a symposium on renovating historic buildings. That day, he wore a crisp white shirt and stood in the middle of the auditorium, talking about preserving the old way of life in a modern city. He didn't go deep into the technical aspects, but his delivery was captivating. A warm voice, confident eyes, a perfectly measured smile. The kind of man who walks into a room and people naturally want to hear more. After the session, I was in the hallway gathering my notes when Julian walked over and handed me a paper I'd dropped. "You're Leah Sutton, right?" I looked up. "How do you know?" "Your comments earlier were the best of the day. Others talked about houses. You talked about the people who live in them." I was a little flustered. A small-town girl on a scholarship, paying her way with freelance work, is easily swayed by someone who recognizes her effort. Youth is like that. A heart as green as an unripe apple. A single compliment, and you think they understand your entire life. From that day on, Julian found excuses to see me. Sometimes it was for a coffee from a cart on campus. Other times he'd bring me books on community planning. He said he wanted to start his own firm, not just to build beautiful houses, but to create places people wanted to come home to. My eyes lit up when I heard that. We'd sit at a cheap diner, steam rising from our bowls of soup, and he'd talk about the future. I'd talk about houses with shared courtyards, long eaves, and ramps for the elderly. At that time, I believed I had met someone who saw the world the same way I did. One time, I was caught in a heavy downpour at a bus stop. Julian showed up on his motorcycle, his raincoat soaked, and handed me a warm sandwich. "I was afraid you'd be too busy drawing to eat." I smiled. "You talk like you know me so well." He looked at me seriously. "I want to." Just those 3 words. I let my heart open its doors. Looking back now, I feel sorry for that girl. Someone just knocked lightly, and she unbolted the lock. Not everyone who enters your house comes to turn on the lights. Some come only to see where you keep the keys. I took Julian home to meet my Nana. She prepared a wonderful meal: pot roast, mashed potatoes, a green bean casserole, and a bowl of chilled cherry cobbler for dessert. Julian ate heartily, praising every dish. Nana smiled kindly, but I knew she was observing him. After dinner, she invited Julian out to the porch for tea. "Julian, this old woman doesn't have much to give Leah, besides a little savings and the profession she learned. If you love her, don't just love her for being sweet. You have to love her for her hard work, too." Julian put his glass down and spoke respectfully. "You can rest assured, Nana, I won't let Leah be disadvantaged." Nana looked at him for a long time, then nodded. That night, after Julian had left, she told me, "He's smooth with his words." Being smooth isn't a bad thing, but remember, honey attracts flies. If you want to build a life together, the paperwork must be clear, and finances must be separate. I hugged her shoulder and laughed. "Nana, you worry too much. We're in love." She sighed. "When you're in love, it's even more important to be clear. Not out of suspicion, but so that if hearts change one day, the truth still has a place to stand." Back then, I only half listened. I still believed love was enough to shelter me from any storm. Our wedding wasn't huge, but the Rhodes family made it very elegant. Eleanor wore a deep plum dress, a string of pearls around her neck, and moved through the guests with a proud expression. She held my hand in front of everyone and smiled sweetly. Having Leah as our daughter-in-law is a blessing for both families. She's talented, but for a woman, being able to keep a home is the greatest talent of all. I felt a little prickle of unease, but Julian, standing beside me, gently squeezed my hand. "That's just how Mom talks. She really likes you." Again, I believed him. I believed Julian's promises to my Nana. I believed Eleanor's smile. I believed that if I just lived decently, my in-laws would eventually love me. That day, as I walked through the gates of the Rhodes home in a white wedding dress, I didn't know that behind those gates lay nearly 6 years of being slowly pushed away from my own name. I certainly didn't know that one day, when I walked out of that same house, I would no longer be a girl trembling with a wedding bouquet, but a woman clutching a stack of papers, fighting to reclaim her entire life. After the wedding, I moved into the Rhodes house permanently. In the early days, I still believed I was stepping into a real home. Eleanor wasn't exactly warm to me, but she wasn't as cold as she would later become. She would often sit at the dining table, sipping her tea, and look at me with an expression that was both scrutinizing and calculating. "It's good for a woman to have a career," she said during one dinner. "But once you're a wife, no matter how talented you are, you have to know when to step back for your husband. Men go out and handle the big things. A smart woman keeps things peaceful at home." I felt a twinge of disappointment, but Julian, sitting next to me, put a piece of chicken on my plate and smiled gently. "That's just Mom's way of talking. The company will belong to both of us." At that time, the words "both of us" meant the world to me. They felt like a wide awning that could shelter me from any unpleasant comments. Not long after, we founded Vanguard Architects. The first office was just a rented 2-story building on a busy street. On the day we hung the company sign, Julian stood on the sidewalk looking up, his eyes shining like a child's. "Leah, one day Vanguard will have its own headquarters. I want people to talk about us as a firm that builds with a soul." I smiled. "Then we have to do good work first." The equity documents were drawn up quite clearly. I contributed the majority of the capital with my own savings, the inheritance from my grandmother, and the value of the foundational design portfolios I had developed. The share ratio stated in the bylaws was 57% for me, 33% for Julian, and 10% for Arthur Vance. Mr. Vance was our former professor, both an investor and a witness for the fledgling company. On the day we signed the bylaws, he looked at me for a long time. "Leah, you must keep a full set of the original documents. Not because you don't trust anyone, but because a professional must know how to protect their work." I remembered my Nana's words and carefully stored a complete set away. So when Julian suggested he be named CEO to make it easier to meet with clients, I didn't object. He was a smooth talker, knew how to shake hands, and could choose just the right words to make people believe him. I was quieter, preferring to sit with blueprints, data, and go on site visits. At the time, I thought we complemented each other. The first project that put Vanguard on the map was the Canyon Echoes Resort near Zion National Park in Utah. The client didn't want a flashy resort. They wanted a place where guests could still feel the presence of the mountains, smell the desert sage, and sense the rhythm of the natural world. Julian brought the proposal home and frowned after a few days. This is tough. If we make it too luxurious, it loses its character. If it's too rustic, guests will say it's primitive. I looked at his initial proposal: a large glass building, an infinity pool, a gleaming marble lobby. It was beautiful, but placing it in the middle of Zion's red rock canyons was like a woman wearing an evening gown to plant a garden. I said gently, "Julian, we shouldn't force the mountain to be a backdrop for the building. We need to let the building nestle into the mountain." He turned to me. "Why don't you try an approach? I know you have a feel for this kind of thing." I accepted. 3 days later, I flew to Utah by myself. I walked the dusty trails, sat and talked with a local guide. I listened to him tell me where the water levels rose, where the wind was strongest, and where tourists always stopped to admire the view. For lunch, I ate at a local diner, a simple meal of chili and cornbread. A woman working there said, "If you're building a place for tourists, remember to leave a way for us locals to recognize our own land. Don't build it up so much that we feel like we're being kicked out of our own home." Her words stayed with me all night. I scrapped the large glass building and broke the project into smaller clusters that followed the natural contours of the rock formations. Low sloping roofs, wide porches, local wood and stone, and deep-toned roof tiles. I preserved the old local trail, turning it into a walking path. I placed the common area under the shade of a large, ancient cottonwood tree. The design wasn't ostentatious, but it had breadth. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Julian would occasionally come in and place a glass of milk on my desk. Without you, I'd be stuck on this until Christmas. I gave a tired smile. "When you present tomorrow, make sure you mention that I was the lead on the concept." He put his arm around my shoulder. "I know. How could I forget your contribution?" The next day, at the presentation, Julian stood before the clients in a navy blue suit, exuding confidence. I sat at the back of the room, my laptop open in case he needed technical support. He talked about architecture that nestles into the mountain, about porches that preserve the rhythm of the land, about a walking path that doesn't sever local memory. Every sentence was smooth, so smooth that I realized almost all of them were lines I had written in my design brief. The clients nodded in approval. "This concept is exactly what we need." "Who developed the main idea?" Shan fraction of a second, then smiled. This was the overall direction of the Vanguard team, and I was personally in charge of the presentation and coordination. I sat frozen. In that short moment, my name was placed under the heel of the blueprint. The project was a success. Vanguard secured its first major contract. A local design magazine ran a story praising CEO Julian Rhodes, the young man bringing a sense of place to resort architecture. A photo of him standing next to the project model was featured prominently. Not a single mention of Leah Sutton. That evening, Eleanor threw a party at a lakeside restaurant. She went from table to table, bragging, "My Julian has had a special eye for things since he was a boy. Everything he touches turns to gold." Mila was busy filming everything on her phone. "My brother is the best. The Rhodes genes are no joke." A young employee named Ben came over and asked quietly, "Leah, why didn't the article mention you? I thought you were the main one on that concept." Before I could answer, Julian walked over and put his arm around my shoulder in front of Ben. "Ben, my wife and I are one and the same. Whether it's my name or Leah's, what's the difference? The important thing is that Vanguard is growing." Ben gave a forced smile and walked away. I looked at Julian's hand on my shoulder. His hand was warm, but his words were cold. If there was truly no difference, why was it always his name that was called? Later that night, I was rereading the article. Julian came in and, seeing my silence, sighed. "You're overthinking it again." "You promised you would mention my name," I said. He sat down next to me. "Leah, the company is new. We need a clear public face. I'm out there more. Clients know me. Once Vanguard is more established, I'll bring you into the spotlight. Don't be petty about this right now." Before I could reply, Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. "Why would a woman squabble over a name? Julian's success is your success. A smart wife knows when to step back and let her husband shine." I lowered my head. "Yes, Mom." She turned away, satisfied. Julian relaxed, as if my silence had solved everything. But that night, when the whole house was asleep, I took out the original concept sketch for the Canyon Echoes Resort. In the bottom right corner, I slowly signed my name, Leah Sutton. Then I wrote the date, took a picture, and saved it to my private hard drive. At that moment, I didn't know that a small signature in the corner of a piece of paper could one day save my entire career. In the darkness of the room, it felt like a tiny matchstick. Not enough to burn down the web of deceit, but just enough for me to see that I still existed. The mansion in Laurelhurst was purchased after Vanguard secured several new contracts. On the day the moving trucks filled the driveway, Eleanor stood in the middle of the yard, hands on her hips, a wide smile on her face. See, what did I tell you? When a family is blessed, the land expands and the doors grow taller. My Julian really has the golden touch. I stood beside her, my shirt dusted with drywall powder, my hair hastily tied back. For the 3 months prior, I had been the one adjusting every light fixture, every stair tread, every ventilation shaft. Where to place the lights in the living room for warmth. How to design the kitchen so cooking smells wouldn't drift upstairs. It all went through my hands. But at the housewarming party, in front of relatives and business partners, Eleanor pulled only Julian into the center of the room. Look, everyone. My son built this empire with his own 2 hands. To go from nothing to this, not everyone can do it. An aunt from his side of the family took a sip of her champagne and looked at me. So, Julian lets you help out with the little details at the company? That is just so sweet. Eleanor gave a slight smile. Oh, Leah helps her husband with some technical matters. A woman's place is in the background. That's how you keep a home. I was carrying a tray of drinks from the kitchen and froze when I heard that. Helps with some technical matters. It sounded as trivial as picking up groceries, while some nights I sat in front of the screen until my neck was stiff. The party menu was lavish: lobster tails, roast chicken, saffron risotto, a rich bouillabaisse. Eleanor went around pouring wine, endlessly praising Julian. Mila, in a white dress, was filming every corner of the house. Hey everyone, this is my family's new mansion, the result of my brother Julian's hard work. As I walked past, Mila called out sharply, Leah, could you move a little? I'm trying to get a shot of the staircase. I stopped. I just adjusted that handrail yesterday. Mila smiled, her eyes still on her phone screen. Yeah, you're good at that behind-the-scenes stuff, but the shot needs to be clean. You get it? I pressed my lips together and went back to the kitchen. They say you should choose your battles wisely. I tried to keep the peace, but in the Rhodes household, my endless patience only seemed to encourage them to climb onto my shoulders. After moving into the mansion, Julian convinced me to move my assets into a joint family trust with his mother's backing. At first, he was sweet about it. Leah, dear, you're a designer. Your mind should be free to create. Let me handle the trust and investments. We need to pool our resources for the firm's expansion. Julian, I'd like to keep a portion of my project bonuses in my personal account. I still have obligations to my family back home, I said. Eleanor, overhearing us, stepped in, her expression changing instantly. Withdrawing from the trust right now? You're married now, Leah. Your financial priority should be Vanguard's cash flow, not liquidating our assets for some small-town charity. Julian looked away, tapping on his phone. Mom is right, Leah. We need all the cash flow for the mortgage and Vanguard's operations right now. If you need a small allowance for personal things, I can transfer it, but touching the trust is out of the question. Just ask me, sounded so simple. But I knew it meant begging. The money I earned, I would have to justify using, like a borrower. A month later, I asked Julian for $2,000 to send back home to help repair the roof of the old community hall, a place my Nana loved. Years of rain had caused it to leak, and a relative had called to ask for donations. Eleanor, sitting nearby, frowned. A community hall in a small town doesn't need your money. $2,000 isn't pocket change. We just moved into this mansion. There are so many expenses. I glanced at Mila's new handbag sitting on a chair. That bag cost over $10,000, paid for by the company accountant under the category of brand imaging expenses. That's my money, I said quietly. Eleanor's head snapped up. You and Julian are building a future together. To say that is to accuse my son of stealing from his own wife. Before I could respond, Julian came down the stairs. What's wrong, Mom? Eleanor immediately sighed. Your wife is demanding money to send home for some town hall repair. I told her we have a lot of expenses right now and to be patient, and she accuses us of taking her money. Julian looked at me with a tired expression. Leah, it's a small thing. Why do you have to upset Mom over it? A bitter laugh escaped me. The place that honors my Nana's memory is a small thing? He faltered, then lowered his voice. I didn't mean that, but you could be more tactful with Mom. She's older. She's older was a powerful phrase in this house. It was like a suit of armor. Whatever Eleanor said was right because she was older. And I, no matter how exhausted, had to be gentle because I was the daughter-in-law. Mila, however, didn't need to be gentle. She held the title of Director of Communications at Vanguard but worked whenever she pleased. She'd arrive at 10 a.m., spend the afternoon taking photos at a coffee shop and posting, "A woman must be financially independent." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on my tea. One afternoon I was revising technical documents for a client. Mila called down from the second floor. "Leah, come up here for a second." "Mila, I'm busy. This file has to be sent by 5 p.m., I replied. "Oh, come on, it'll just take 5 minutes. Communications are important too, you know." I went to her room. 3 outfits, makeup, and handbags were spread across her bed. Mila stood in front of the mirror, turning back and forth. "I'm meeting a TV producer this afternoon to pitch an interview for Julian. Which of these outfits looks sophisticated but not over the top?" I glanced at the clock. The cream-colored one. It's elegant and bright. She picked it up, looked at it, then tossed it back on the bed. "This one's too plain. Here, write a caption for me. Something like, 'The woman behind the successful man.' But make it sound chic." I looked at her. "Mila, I am not your assistant." She spun around. "What did you say?" "I'm the director of design. I can't just drop my blueprints to write social media captions for you." Her face darkened. She opened the door and yelled downstairs. "Mom, Leah says I'm treating her like an assistant." Eleanor came up the stairs quickly. Mila immediately switched to a wounded tone. "I just asked for her input on promoting Julian, and she accused me of ordering her around like a servant." Eleanor looked at me. "Leah, you're her sister-in-law. What's the harm in helping her a little? Everyone in this house is working for the company. Don't draw lines between your job and hers. It sounds so cold." I looked at her, then at Julian, who had just appeared in the hallway. I waited for him to say something fair, but he just gently pulled my arm. "Come on, Leah. Mila's young and a bit thoughtless. Don't stoop to her level. She's 29 years old. How much longer is she going to be young?" I asked. Mila pouted. "Without Julian out there networking, your blueprints would just be sitting on your computer." That sentence was like a slap. It wasn't vulgar or loud, but it struck directly at my professional dignity. I looked at Julian. He avoided my eyes. Eleanor concluded, "All right, everyone just be patient. If the women in the house are always competing, the family will fall apart." I fell silent, but inside, I felt myself growing colder, piece by piece. That night, I stood alone on the third-floor balcony. The garden lights below cast a golden glow on the koi pond. This mansion was truly beautiful. Every corner, every window, every wall. But the more I looked, the more I felt like a guest in a place I had helped build brick by brick. I went back into my room and opened a drawer to look at an old blueprint. My signature was still there in the corner, small and modest on the bottom right. I touched the letters, Leah Sutton. At least on this piece of paper, I was still me. Nana Rose passed away on a drizzly morning. The news from my hometown came while I was in a meeting at Vanguard, a model of a new resort in front of me. My phone vibrated continuously in my pocket. When I saw my uncle's name on the screen, my heart sank. I excused myself to take the call. On the other end, my uncle's voice was thick with emotion. "Leah, your Nana's gone. She passed away early this morning. Before she went, she asked if you'd had lunch yet." I leaned against the hallway wall, my ears ringing. The sounds of the office printers, employees talking, seemed to come from a distant place. I knew she had been frail for a long time, but I always thought she would wait for me a little longer. My last living relative in the world, and I wasn't even there to hold her hand at the end. I called Julian immediately. He answered on the third ring. "Where are you?" "I'm about to meet a client from out of town." "What's wrong?" I swallowed a lump in my throat. "Nana passed away. Can you come home to Ohio with me? Just for one day." There was a pause on the other end. Then Julian sighed. "Leah, today is really impossible. We've been chasing this client for months. If I back out now, it'll look really bad. You go ahead. I'll figure things out when I'm done tonight." I closed my eyes. That was my Nana, Julian. "I know, and I'm sad too. But the dead are gone. We have to take care of the living. Please, just understand this one time." "One time." I laughed, but tears streamed down my face. Over the past 6 years, he had used the phrase one time so often that if I collected them all, I could probably build a wall taller than the mansion's gate. Before I could hang up, Eleanor called on another line. The moment I answered, she said, "Leah, I heard from Julian. You go ahead and take care of things, but remember your timing. We have a magazine photo shoot this weekend. Don't let it be affected." I stood there, stunned. "Mom, my grandmother died." Eleanor's voice softened, but there was no warmth in it. "I know, dear, but she's gone. Crying won't bring her back. We still have a business to run. The company is on a roll right now. Don't let sadness drag our fortunes down." Her every word cut into me. Funerals are sacred, a final act of love. But in the Rhodes house, even that duty had to take a back seat to a photo shoot schedule. I packed a small bag with black clothes. Mila, sitting at the reception desk, saw me leaving and asked, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to Ohio. My grandmother passed away." Mila paused, then gave a perfunctory nod. "Oh, well, try to be back soon. I still need you to edit the article for Julian's interview." I looked at her. "Mila, my family is in mourning." She bit her lip, realizing her mistake, but a few seconds later, she became defensive. "Well, I didn't say you couldn't go. I'm just reminding you about work. We have to compartmentalize, right?" I didn't answer. Some people are so shallow that the pain of others doesn't even ripple the surface of their world. I took a bus to Ohio. The rain streaked across the window, blurring the gray-green fields of the late autumn landscape. I clutched the bag of morning clothes on my lap, remembering the smell of camphor on my Nana's hands, the clatter of her old sewing machine under the porch eaves. When I reached my hometown, mud clung to the cuffs of my pants. Nana's little house was fuller than usual, but it felt emptier than ever. A viewing was held at the local funeral home. Her portrait looked at me as kindly as always, only this time, she couldn't reach out to wipe away my tears. My uncle put his hand on my shoulder. "She went peacefully. Before she passed, she told us not to call you home in a hurry. She was afraid of interrupting your important work." I knelt before the casket, tears falling silently. The person who spent her whole life worrying I would struggle, even in death, was afraid of bothering me. The neighbors came to pay their respects. An elderly woman from next door held my hand. "Your Nana lived a clean life. She was poor, but she never asked anyone for a single penny she didn't earn. She was so proud of you, always bragging about how you could draw houses. She said one day, people would have to call you by your rightful name." I bowed my head. In my hometown, people showed their love with simple, honest words. A bowl of hot soup passed over the fence, a hand helping me stand up, a neighbor reminding me to eat a bite of food so I wouldn't faint. Those simple things were more real than any of the brightly lit banquets at the Seattle mansion. The funeral meal was just a simple casserole, potato salad, baked beans, and a piece of fried chicken. I sat there, a lump in my throat. When I was little, Nana used to say that in a poor house, there isn't much meat, but people must eat together with love. In the Rhodes house, every dish was fancy, but many meals left me feeling only cold. The first night, I sat by my Nana's casket at the funeral home. The rain tapped on the roof, and the smell of lilies mingled with the scent of damp earth. I took out an old handkerchief she had sewn for me when I left for Seattle. It had the letter L embroidered on it, the stitches uneven, but every one was made with love. I remembered her words the last time I visited. "Leah, life is fickle. People can love you today and hate you tomorrow. But paper and ink don't know how to flatter anyone. What is yours, you must hold on to. Don't let it get to a point where you have to beg others to acknowledge you ever existed." The next morning, we took her to the cemetery. The whole path was muddy. I held her portrait, walking behind the casket, rain lashing my face. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. There was no Julian, no Eleanor, no Mila. Just my relatives, the neighbors, and a few people for whom Nana had sewn clothes for half their lives. An old man leaning on a cane walked beside me and said softly, "Child, a person's worth isn't measured by big wreaths or fancy cars. It's measured by who is willing to stand with you when you hit rock bottom." His words followed me all the way back to Seattle. I arrived at the mansion after dark. The gates were open, the house ablaze with yellow light. Laughter and conversation spilled out onto the driveway. I was still wearing my morning clothes, my hair damp from the rain. In the living room, Eleanor was entertaining guests. Julian stood beside her, impeccably dressed in a suit. When he saw me, he rushed over. "You're back. Why didn't you let me know? I would have picked you up." I looked at him. If he had really wanted to pick me up, he would have asked where I was that morning. Eleanor glanced at my morning clothes and frowned slightly. Go upstairs and change. We have guests. It's not appropriate. Not appropriate. My grief was an inconvenience to their social gathering. I walked past Mila. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Can you edit that interview for me before you go to sleep? It's urgent." I looked at Mila for a long time, then pulled my arm away. No. Mila froze. What did you say? I said no. For the first time in the Rhodes house, I said that word without offering an explanation. I went to my room and closed the door. The smell of funeral lilies still clung to my clothes. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed, "Original design evidence." Nana was gone, but her words were not. From that moment on, I was no longer just being patient to keep the peace. I started saving everything, because I knew that one day, if I didn't have documents to speak for me, my own voice would be drowned out by the very people who called me family. Outside, the laughter in the living room continued. Inside, I dried my hands, opened my private hard drive, and saved the first file. After creating that first evidence folder, I knew I had crossed a very thin line. On the outside, I was still the daughter-in-law of the Rhodes family, still sitting next to Julian during picture-perfect family dinners. But inside, I was no longer the woman waiting for her husband's affection and her mother-in-law's understanding. I started to save everything, not furtively like someone doing wrong, but with the calm resolve of a person waking from a long dream. Every design I created had its own backup. Every email exchange with a client was meticulously filed. For every technical meeting, I recorded the minutes and sent them to the entire group, no longer relying on verbal agreements. One day, Julian saw me printing out project documents and frowned. "Why are you printing so much? Saving it on the company server is enough." I smiled faintly. "Paper and ink are still easier to read. I'm just being thorough to avoid mistakes." He looked at me longer than usual. "You've been overly cautious lately." I folded the stack of papers. In this profession, if you're not careful, one wrong line can ruin the entire project. Julian said no more, but his eyes held a flicker of annoyance. Before, the more accommodating I was, the more at ease he felt. Now that I was starting to be precise, he looked at me as if I were a thorn in his side. I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Franklin, on a weekend afternoon. His office was in a small building downtown, and on the wall hung a photo of him with Nana Rose in front of our old town's community hall. Mr. Franklin poured me a cup of tea. "Nana Rose once asked me to keep an eye on you. Old folks are like that, worrying about things their children haven't even seen yet." I placed a folder of blueprints and the original shareholder agreement in front of him. "I don't want to sue anyone yet. I just want to know what I need to keep." He read for a long time, then said, "You're on the right track. But remember, winning isn't about collecting the most evidence. It has to have a source, a timeline, a narrative. A single piece of paper is weak. Many pieces of paper, when pieced together, build an ironclad case." From that day on, I worked like a net weaver. For every project I led, I saved the first sketch, the mid-process revisions, and the final version. For every idea that came from a site visit, I kept photos, the names of the locals I spoke with, the time, and the location. For critical designs, I filed for copyright under my own name. The more records I kept, the more I saw the unclean parts of the company. At first, it was just a few strange media expenses. Mila would sign contracts for brand photo shoots, content creation, and events at prices well above market rate. But the deliverables were just a few links to online articles and some photos of her standing next to Julian. One invoice for building an inspiring leadership image was actually for hiring someone to Photoshop Julian's photos and write articles praising his vision. One afternoon, I went to the accounting department and asked the head accountant, Brenda, "Why isn't there an effectiveness report attached to last quarter's media contract?" Brenda, who was stamping invoices, suddenly slowed down. "Mila is supposed to send that over later, but the invoice was already almost fully paid." She looked up at me, her eyes weary. "Leah, some things, I just do as I'm told." Her answer wasn't an answer, but it was clearer than one. I didn't press her. A person walking on a rotten bridge looks at their own feet first. No one jumps, just because someone else calls out. Besides Mila's contracts, I saw the name Anson Development appearing repeatedly for strategic consulting fees. The legal representative was Eleanor's brother. 3 consecutive contracts for no small sum, with nearly identical, vague scopes of work. I asked Julian in his office, "Julian, what part does Anson Development play for us? I've never seen them in a single technical meeting." Julian, looking at his phone, immediately scowled. That's one of Mom's connections. They provide outside support. You don't need to know the details. If the company is paying for it, there should be deliverables. He put his phone down on the desk. Leah, you're starting to sound more like an auditor than my wife. I'm a shareholder, I replied. I have the right to ask. Julian looked at me as if it were the first time he'd heard the word shareholder from his wife's mouth. You're talking about rights to me? In our own family? I paused for a second. What would you prefer I speak in? Affection? He pulled the blinds shut. You're making everything so heavy. Mom is upset that you're constantly asking for paperwork. She thinks you don't trust the family. I looked at him and suddenly felt a bone-deep weariness. A family isn't a place where one person tells another to close their eyes and sign. That evening, Eleanor called me down to the dining room. On the table was a freshly poured glass of red wine. As soon as I sat down, she slid it across the marble surface towards me. Drink this. You've been so on edge lately, and when people are on edge, they tend to overstep their bounds. I put my spoon down. If you have something to say, Mom, please say it directly. She looked at me, her voice still soft, but every word had a thorn. I've heard you've been questioning the accountants, asking about contracts, even our business relationships. You live in your husband's house, but you act like an outsider with a ledger. I remained calm. I ask because I have a responsibility to the company. Responsibility? She laughed faintly. Your greatest responsibility is to keep this house peaceful. A smart woman doesn't air her family's dirty laundry. If there's something you're not happy with, you discuss it behind closed doors. You don't wave papers around to threaten your husband. I looked at the wine. It was an expensive vintage, but I knew it would taste bitter. Mom, I haven't threatened anyone. Then stop acting like everyone has wronged you. This family gave you a name, a place to stand. You need to be grateful. I suddenly remembered what my Nana used to say. Loyalty is important, but you shouldn't let the people you help treat you like a doormat. I was once grateful to this family for giving me a home, but gratitude doesn't mean offering your neck for someone to step on. I stood up. Excuse me, I have work to do. Eleanor's voice turned cold. You're getting more and more difficult. I didn't turn back. Sometimes, arguing only gives them another excuse to play the victim. A few days later, Mr. Vance called me. Leah, is everything okay at the company? I've noticed Julian has been sending fewer reports than before. I looked at my computer screen, which was open to a list of suspicious contracts. I wanted to tell him everything, but it wasn't enough yet. A word without proof is just a stone tossed into a pond. It makes a splash and then sinks. Yes, the company is running, but there are a few things I'm reviewing. Mr. Vance was silent for a moment. If you need me to look at anything, just send it over. Yes, Mr. Vance. When I have a complete picture, I will. After hanging up, I opened my private hard drive and created a new folder. Questionable finances. I moved each file into its proper place. Contracts, invoices, completion reports, email directives, payment schedules. Outside the door, I could hear Eleanor and Mila laughing. They still believed I was the woman who was easy to placate, quick to forget, and soft-hearted. They didn't know I was learning how to make my silence carry weight. That night, I wrote a line in my journal. Silence is not surrender. Silence is to hear clearly the footsteps of the person sneaking up behind you. I thought I had grown accustomed to the coldness in the Rhodes house after days of secretly gathering documents, but life never warns you when it's about to throw you into a sharp turn. That morning, Julian walked into my office with an expression I rarely saw. He wasn't confident, not smiling his usual client-facing smile. He placed a thick binder on my desk. Leah, I need you to look at this proposal. I looked at the cover. The words Riverbend Commons were printed in bold. Below it was the name of a major developer, Ethelred Group, and eco-urban community on the Duwamish River. The total investment was $120 million. The requirements were demanding. Create a modern living space while preserving the memory of the existing community and solving the seasonal flooding problem. I flipped through the pages. The more I read, the more I saw that Vanguard's proposal was off track. The commercial townhouses took up too much of the riverfront. The water retention pond was shrunk to the size of a decorative pool. The community market was pushed to the fringe, and the senior living area was placed right next to the parking garage. If this was presented, they would see a beautiful drawing meant for sales, not a place worth living in. Who was the lead on this proposal? I asked. Julian hesitated. Me and the design team, but Ethelred isn't satisfied. Not satisfied is an understatement. They want an urban community that lives with the river. This looks like we're using the river as a backdrop to sell houses. Julian's face darkened for a moment, then softened immediately. I know. That's why I'm asking for your help. I closed the binder. Asking for my help in what capacity? As your wife, or as the director of design? The question made him pause. In the past, if he had asked, I would have immediately agreed. Now, I wanted to hear a clear answer. That afternoon, Eleanor called me down to the living room. On the table was a pot of tea, a plate of cookies, and a bowl of ripe persimmons. Mila was there too, her usual disdainful expression gone. Eleanor spoke first. Leah, I know you've endured a lot these past few years. I'm getting old. Sometimes I say things without thinking. Don't hold it against me. I looked at her. The woman who had interrogated me over every dollar I sent home for the community hall was now claiming she spoke without thinking. It seemed that when needed, even a crocodile could shed tears on cue. Julian sat next to me, his voice low. Riverbend Commons is crucial for Vanguard. If we win this, it'll be a new chapter for the company. I want you to lead the redevelopment of the concept. And where will my name be? I asked. The air grew tense. Mila glanced at her mother. This time will be different. Eleanor forced a smile. I'll make it clear to Julian that you are the lead concept developer. At the presentation, your name will be properly acknowledged. Julian took my hand. I promise, I'll make it right this time. I know I've let you down. Give me a chance. His hand was warm, his voice still the one that had softened my heart so many times. But my heart was no longer a thin shirt hanging in the yard, ready to be blown away by any gust of wind. I pulled my hand away and said calmly, if I do this, all technical discussions must be done via group email. All meetings must have minutes, and I will keep the original copies. Any changes related to functionality, the retention pond, drainage lines, or community spaces must clearly state who proposed them and why. Mila frowned. Why are you being so intense, like you're signing an international treaty? I looked at her. Mila, this is a $100 million project. One wrong stroke of a pen could make life miserable for hundreds of residents. This isn't a social media post you can just delete. Mila's face flushed. Eleanor quickly interjected. All right, we'll do it your way, as long as the project wins. As long as the project wins sounded casual, but I knew it held the entire weight of the Rhodes family's desperation. They didn't need me to be respected. They needed me to save their game. That night, I sat alone in my office. The Riverbend Commons file was open before me. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled. I remembered my Nana's words. When people need you, they'll be sweet. Don't listen to the honey. Look at where they put their signature. I opened my computer and created a new email group, including myself, Julian, the design team, the lead infrastructure engineer, Leo Martinez, and a technical assistant. The first subject line I typed was, Riverbend Commons, concept development scope and technical tracking. I sent an accompanying request that all working documents be saved on the shared server. Simultaneously, I made my own personal backups. 3 days later, I started my survey of the riverfront. It was early, a thin mist hanging over the banks. I walked past rows of old warehouses, small coffee stands, and weathered houses, their paint faded by time. An old woman selling donuts from a cart handed me a warm one and smiled. Are you working on the project here? Whatever you do, please leave us a way to get to the water. I sat on a plastic stool, eating the donut, which still smelled of warm sugar. I listened as she told me about the flood season, where the kids played, where the old folks gathered to catch the breeze. These stories made me understand that this place wasn't just land on a map, it was life. An elderly man with white hair, leaning on a cane, stood by a large tree near the riverbank. I asked him what he feared most if the new development came. He looked at the water for a long time and said, build what you must, but don't build it so much that the old residents feel like strangers in their own home. I wrote his words in my notebook. My handwriting was a little shaky, because I understood that feeling better than anyone. I, too, was living in a house where every day I felt more and more like a stranger. From then on, I practically lived with the Riverbend Commons project. I kept the row of trees along the bank, opened up a small plaza for the old residents to gather, designed an open-air library near the children's area, and placed a senior wellness garden under the shade of the trees instead of pushing it to a hidden corner. The retention pond was no longer a decorative feature but the lungs that would hold water for the entire area. The small market was preserved in a neater form so the vegetable sellers, the donut vendors, and the fishermen could still make a living. The engineer, Leo Martinez, looked at the first draft and nodded. Leah, The drainage on the north side must be preserved like this. If anyone narrows it later to increase commercial space, there will be trouble during the rainy season. I immediately asked him to send a warning via email. Leo gave a hesitant smile. "You're very thorough," I replied. "Being thorough now means no one can say we never warned them later." Late that afternoon, I returned to the office. Julian was standing behind me, looking at the new renderings on my screen, his eyes shining. "That's it. This is what Athelred needs." I turned to him. "Do you remember your promise?" He looked at me and nodded. "I remember. This time, your name will be called." I smiled, but my hand was still on the mouse, clicking save. The folder name appeared clearly on the screen: Riverbend Commons, Original Concept, Leah Sutton. I didn't know why, but in that moment, I felt no peace. Some promises, the more beautiful they sound, the more you need to keep a backup copy. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Vanguard's design studio was still empty, with only the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I opened the Riverbend Commons plan, zoomed in on the northern riverfront, and just sat there looking at it for a long time. That piece of land wasn't a blank canvas for anyone to paint on. It had an old sycamore tree, a worn-out public dock, old women who came out to catch the breeze in the evenings, and kids who played soccer on the packed dirt. I started to overhaul the entire plan. The retention pond was extended to follow the natural topography, not forced into a neat square for pretty pictures. I kept the row of trees along the bank. I opened a walking path that looped through the small market. The senior wellness garden was placed under the trees near the community health clinic. The open-air library was next to the playground, so grandparents could read the paper while watching their grandkids play. I worked until almost noon when the engineer, Leo Martinez, walked in. Leo was a quiet man with tanned skin and a slightly gaunt frame. He pulled up a chair next to me, looked at the drawing, and nodded. "It's good that you're keeping this part of the pond. It's not just for looks. It holds the water for the whole inner area. What if they reduce the pond's area by about 15% to add more commercial kiosks?" I asked. Leo frowned. "They shouldn't. During a heavy rain, the runoff from the main road comes in fast. If you shrink the pond and redirect the northern drainage route, the risk of localized flooding is very high. Can you send me a warning about that via email?" He looked at me with some surprise. "Do you need it to be that formal?" "I need everything to be clear. Spoken words are easily blown away by the wind." Leo gave a sad smile. "I've been in this business a long time, and you're the first designer I've met who actually listens to the engineers. Most people just want a glamorous rendering. If it floods, they tell the residents to roll up their pants." His joke made me laugh, but my heart felt heavy. For a design to truly live, it has to pass through many minds. If just one person puts their interests in the wrong place, an entire community can pay the price. That afternoon, Julian called an internal meeting. In the room were myself, Leo, the design team, Mila, and 2 people from the business development side. Julian stood in front of the screen, pointing to the riverfront strip. "Leah's concept has soul, I'll give her that. But we need more commercial opportunities. Athelred is a business, not a charity." A business development staffer immediately nodded. "He's right. If we increase the riverside kiosks, the projected rental income will look much better." I put down my pen. The riverfront cannot become a row of kiosks. The project brief requires preserving the dock, the community, and the open corridor. If we force commercialization into that space, we destroy the very thing that will make our proposal win. Mila scoffed. "Leah always talks like she's saving the world. The client is spending over $100 million. You think it's so a few old people can sit and watch the breeze?" I looked at Mila. "Those old people watching the breeze won't make the project any poorer. An urban development that only knows how to sell every square foot is the truly poor one." The room was silent for a few seconds. Julian frowned. "You make a good point, but we have to be practical. We can move the wellness garden inside and use the riverfront for light service-oriented businesses. It won't change the spirit much." Leo hesitated. "If we move the garden to an inner corner, the afternoon sun will be very harsh, making it unusable for the elderly. And, as for the drainage line," Julian cut him off. "Leo, we need solutions, not just a list of problems." I turned to Julian. "The solution is to stick to the original principles. Profit isn't wrong, but trading safety for a few stalls is like selling someone a raincoat while they're already standing under a roof." A few of the junior staff looked down. Mila pouted but didn't dare interject again. The meeting ended without a clear conclusion. Julian told me to send him two versions, one that preserved the community spirit and one that was commercially optimized for his reference. I only sent the official version through the group email, with clear notes on which items should not be changed and the technical reasons why. I saved the original version on my own hard drive. When I got home that night, Eleanor was already waiting in the dining room. On the table was a plate of roast chicken, a bowl of mashed potatoes, and a fresh garden salad. The meal looked simple, but her voice was not. Julian told me you objected to the project changes. I put my bag down. I objected to changes that could affect the drainage and community spaces. Eleanor put a piece of fish in Julian's bowl and glanced at me. If you're in business, but you're too sentimental about the people, you'll never get rich. In this life, smart people seize opportunities. Only a fool would turn away a feast laid right in front of them. I replied softly, Mom, a project isn't a feast. You can't just grab all the best pieces for yourself. Julian put his chopsticks down. Leah, don't talk to Mom with that competitive tone. I looked at him. I'm talking about the project. Mila, who was eating while scrolling through her phone, suddenly exclaimed, Mom, my post about Julian is getting a lot of engagement. The man creating a new icon on the river. Sounds good, right? I turned to her. The project hasn't been finalized. Don't write as if everything belongs to Julian alone. Mila smirked. In media, you have to be one step ahead, Leah. In this day and age, if you're silent, you sink. You're so caught up in the technical details, it's no wonder no one remembers your name. Julian didn't stop his sister. Eleanor even smiled with satisfaction. That's right. We need people to remember Julian first. The company needs one face. Too many names just create confusion. I looked down at my bowl of rice. The rice was hot, but my throat felt cold. They always talked about teamwork and being a family. But in this house, the entire team had to bow down so that one man could stand tall. A few weeks later, the results for the Riverbend Commons concept round came in. Vanguard won. The news arrived late in the afternoon. The whole office erupted in cheers. Julian walked out of a meeting room, his eyes shining. Mila immediately turned on her camera. Julian, look over here. Smile. That's it, the visionary CEO look. The whole room laughed. I smiled too, but the smile vanished quickly. I found Julian in a corner of the hallway, away from the cameras. Do you remember your promise? He looked at me. What promise? I went silent. He immediately corrected himself. Oh, the thing about your name. I remember. I'll mention it at the press conference. Not just mention it. The official introduction materials have to credit me as the lead concept developer. Julian looked slightly annoyed. Leah, don't act like I'm trying to steal your credit. This is a happy moment. I looked at him for a long time. It's because it's a happy moment that I'm asking now. Once you're on stage, I don't want to hear we're one and the same again. He gave a forced smile. All right, I get it. But his eyes darted away. That night, I stayed late at the office. The distant city was just a dark sliver on the horizon. I opened the final design file and checked every layer. The retention pond, the drainage lines, the open-air library, the wellness garden, the community dock. Then I clicked Save. The file name appeared clearly, Riverbend Commons, Original Concept, Lead Leah Sutton. I backed it up again to my private hard drive. As I ejected the drive, I heard the pitter-patter of rain on the window. For some reason, my heart felt heavy. The project had just been won. The whole company was celebrating, but I felt like I had just placed a stone at the mouth of a deep well. If one day I needed to call the truth up, at least it would know the way back. The Riverbend Commons press conference was held at a grand hotel downtown. I arrived nearly 40 minutes early. The lobby smelled of lilies, and event staff were adjusting the backdrop and testing the microphones. On the large screen, the words, Riverbend Commons, a new icon of living on the river, were displayed prominently under the logos of Aethelred Group and Vanguard. I stood there for a long time. Despite my unease, I loved this project like my own child. Eleanor arrived next, wearing a deep purple velvet dress and a pearl necklace. Mila was filming everything, a wide smile on her face. Our family is going to look amazing today. Julian looks like a total star architect. I was standing next to the project model. Mila panned her camera past me for a second, then quickly swung it to Julian, who had just walked in. Here he is, the man of the hour. Man of the hour. The words were so light, yet they sent a chill down my spine. Julian walked over and adjusted his tie. Did you check the final slides for me? I checked them. I also sent you the final technical brief last night. He flinched when he heard me use I instead of we, but in front of everyone, he just smiled. I asked him directly, Julian, will today's introductory materials clearly state my role? He quickly avoided my gaze. Yes, don't worry, I'll talk about it later. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Aethelred Group, walked in with his technical board and several business reporters. The press conference started on time. The host talked about the project's scale, about creating a community that wasn't just a place to live, but a guardian of riverside memories. I listened to every word, my heart beating slowly. Those were the things I had written in my very first brief. The host smiled. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the lead architect and CEO of Vanguard Architects, Mr. Julian Rhodes, the lead visionary behind Riverbend Commons. The room burst into applause. I sat in the second row, my fingers digging into the edge of my folder. Lead visionary, Julian Rhodes. No Leah Sutton, no design team, not a single word for the person who had walked the riverbanks, listening to old-timers tell stories of the flood season. Julian walked onto the stage and took the microphone. To me, Riverbend Commons is not just a project. It's a promise to the memory of the riverside residents. We believe that a new urban area must not turn old residents into strangers. A porch doesn't just provide shade, it preserves community dignity. I stared at him. Those sentences were from my survey notebook. One I had written while eating a donut by the water. Another I had revised 3 times at 2 in the morning. Now they were being read in my husband's deep, warm voice, and the entire room was applauding him. I didn't cry. The first time my name was erased, I cried all night. This time, my tears felt frozen. Only one thought ran through my mind. They didn't forget me. They chose not to say my name. Julian's presentation started smoothly. But during the Q&A, a reporter asked why the design team had placed the senior wellness garden under the old trees near the walking path instead of in the central amenities core for easier management. Julian paused. Because we wanted to create a natural connection between the landscape and the residents' lives. The reporter pressed on about the old trees and the infrastructure. Julian looked down at the audience. His eyes searched for mine. I sat still. Eleanor turned slightly, her sharp eyes reminding me to behave. Julian gave a strained smile. For that part, I'd like to invite my wife, Leah Sutton, who supported our technical team, to share more. My wife supported our technical team. I stood up, took a microphone, and walked to the model. This row of trees isn't just landscaping, it's a landmark of memory for the old residents. The elderly in the area use this tree line to find their way to the water. If we were to remove it, the new urban area would be beautiful in renderings but cold in real life. I moved on to the wellness garden. We placed this area under the old trees to avoid the harsh afternoon sun, and also to be near the community health clinic and the children's playground. Many American families have grandparents who care for their grandchildren. In our design, we didn't separate the elderly from the young, because real life doesn't operate in neat little boxes on a blueprint. I continued, talking about the retention pond, the northern drainage line, the small market that was kept so that old vendors wouldn't be displaced from their livelihoods. When I finished, the room applauded. The applause wasn't as loud as when Julian had come up, but it was real, so real that Julian's face stiffened. Mr. Sterling looked at me. Thank you, Miss Sutton. Those details are very important. It's safe to say the community-first approach is the key differentiator of this proposal. Just as I was about to respond, Julian stepped up beside me, placing a hand lightly on my back in front of everyone. That's right. My wife was a great help to me during the survey phase. At Vanguard, we always work as one family. One family. I almost laughed out loud. His family was a place where the lead contributor was called support, where the person who kept the soul of the project was placed in the background to improve the photo op. The press conference ended with handshakes. Eleanor pulled Julian away to take pictures with the Aethelred executives. Mila ran around, finding the best angles. Julian, stand in the middle. Leah, could you step a little to the left to balance the frame? I stepped back, but this time, in my heart, I was no longer retreating. That night, the family celebrated at the mansion. Eleanor raised her glass in front of the relatives. Today, my Julian has added another great achievement to his name. $100 million project, no less. An uncle praised Julian for having the look of a great architect. Mila chimed in. That's my brother. Handsome and smart. A limited edition. Everyone roared with laughter. I sat beside them, the taste in my mouth bitter. Celebrating on someone else's hard work is like borrowing a clean coat to hide your rags. In the middle of the meal, Julian's phone lit up. He glanced at it and quickly flipped it over. The message preview was just visible enough for me to see. "You were amazing. I'll be waiting at the usual place tonight." The sender's name was Diane Palmer. I held my glass of water, my fingers going cold. Diane was a young, sharp public relations manager who always called Julian Vanguard's Julian in a half-joking, half-flirtatious tone. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask questions at the dinner table. I just looked at the man who had just recited my words on stage, now hiding a text message under the palm of his hand. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I opened my computer. A certain PR consulting firm received regular payments, and from there, a down payment on a luxury condo worth $750,000 appeared. A series of invoices for watches, handbags, and jewelry, totaling about $50,000, were vaguely described as imaging expenses. People can lie, but cash flow rarely knows how to act. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the desk. It rolled once before settling next to my mouse. I didn't file for divorce right away. I didn't start a fight. I just opened my private hard drive, created a new folder, and named it Irregular Cash Flow. The Rhodes family was probably sleeping soundly in their dream of prestige. But I, for the first time in years, was wide awake and did not feel weak. From the night I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the desk, I no longer looked at Julian Rhodes with the eyes of a wife waiting for her husband to come back. I continued to live in the Laurelhurst mansion, to come down for dinner when Eleanor called, to sit next to Julian during family gatherings, and to let Mila order me around with her mix of sweet talk and contempt. But in my heart, the door to them was closed. The next morning, I went to Mr. Franklin's office. He looked at my pale face and pushed a cup of hot tea toward me. "Have you had enough pain yet?" I bowed my head. "Yes, I've had enough." "Good. Then from now on, don't let pain make your decisions. Pain makes you angry, and anger makes you careless. They are waiting for you to lose your temper so they can paint you as an out-of-control woman." I placed a stack of bank statements in front of him. I found the money trail that goes through a shell company and is linked to Diane Palmer's condo. Mr. Franklin didn't open it right away. He asked, "Do you want to expose an affair, or do you want to reclaim the truth?" I was silent for a few seconds. "I want to reclaim the truth." "Then don't call Miss Palmer. Don't post on social media. Don't text Julian in anger. From now on, every word you write must be considered as if you were standing before a shareholders meeting." I nodded. He took a piece of paper and divided it into 4 quadrants with his pen. 1. Copyright. 2. Shares. 3. Cash flow. 4. Project modifications. Don't try to tackle it all at once. Every day, just lay one brick correctly. From that day on, I lived like someone walking through fog but holding a lantern. During the day, I still worked at Vanguard. At night, I organized my evidence. For each document, I noted the source, the date received, the sender, the original file, the modified file, who attended the meeting, and what changes were made. One night, around 2 a.m., I was still at my computer. Julian opened the door. "What are you doing up so late?" "Reviewing the Riverbend Commons files. The project already won the concept round. You don't need to scrutinize every line like that." I didn't look at him. Winning the concept isn't winning the implementation. If the documents are wrong, the whole company pays the price later. He laughed dryly. "You sound more like an internal auditor these days." "Maybe Vanguard needs a real audit," I replied. His face darkened at that. He stood behind me for a moment, then left. The sound of the door closing wasn't loud, but it was enough to tell me he was starting to be wary. I continued to trace the consulting contracts from Anson Development, the company owned by Eleanor's brother. 3 contracts in just over a year, totaling $1.74 million. All for market development strategy consulting. But in the deliverables folder were only a few shoddy presentations with recycled content. I printed the contracts and cross-referenced the payment schedules. Some of the funds, after entering Anson Development, were forwarded to a personal account with the memo loan repayment. That account was linked to the mortgage for the Laurelhurst mansion, the house where Eleanor boasted that every chair and cup belonged to the Rhodes family. It turned out the company's money was flowing underneath it like groundwater. The second trail was Mila's media budget. A contract for $490,000 for building leadership brand image, multi-platform content production, and press relations. The deliverables consisted of a few PR links, some heavily edited photos, and 3 short videos Mila called her inspiration campaign. I asked the accounting department for the performance report appendix. Brenda handed me a thin stack of papers, her hand trembling slightly. This is all there is, Leah. Brenda, a $500,000 contract. And this is the deliverable? How did this pass? She glanced toward the door and lowered her voice. Leah, I'm a salaried employee. Some of these invoices were signed off by Julian, and Eleanor called me down personally to instruct me. I didn't dare argue. I'm not asking you to argue. I'm just asking, if there's an audit later, will you tell the truth? Her eyes welled up. I have 2 kids in college. I'm scared. I nodded. I understand. But remember, whoever's name is on the paper has to explain it later. Don't let someone else guide your hand to sign and then leave you to take the blame. She didn't answer, but as I was leaving her office, she called out softly, Leah, if you need copies of the payment slips, let me know beforehand. Just that one small sentence, but I knew the wall of silence had cracked. Diane Palmer was different. She liked to show off her favored status. One afternoon, I ran into her in the elevator. She was wearing a tight beige dress, a new watch on her wrist that I recognized from an invoice. Leah, leaving so late? Julian is waiting for me to go meet a client. I watched the floor numbers change slowly on the display. PR work must be busy. Diane smiled, her voice sickeningly sweet. Oh, I just helped Julian with the things you aren't suited for. A man in his position needs someone on his side who understands him. I turned to look at her. It's good to be understanding. But don't misunderstand company money for a man's personal piggy bank. The smile froze on Diane's lips. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out first. A few days later, Eleanor started getting anxious. Julian must have told her I was asking too many questions. One evening, she called me down to the living room. On the table were several sheets of paper, topped with a bank's folder. Leah, sign these for me. They're internal documents we need to supplement the file so the bank will release the project funds. I looked down. The last 3 pages were blank, with only a signature line at the bottom. These pages are empty. Eleanor frowned. The legal department is printing the appendix, but we need the signature first to make the deadline. You've been with the company for years. You know how this works. I looked up at Julian. He sat next to her, his voice soft. Just sign it, Leah. It's really urgent. These pages are just for internal confirmation. It's nothing. I heard my Nana's voice clearly in my head. Never let someone else hold your papers for you. But if I refused now, they would know I was suspicious. A cornered animal, once it knows its tracks have been seen, will change its path. I said, let me go get my pen. I took the papers to my room and closed the door. My hands were cold, but my mind was clear. I laid each blank page on my desk and took a picture, capturing the empty page, the signature line, the wall clock, and the diamond tennis bracelet Eleanor had left on the table. I immediately sent the photos to Mr. Franklin with a message. I'm being asked to sign blank pages. He replied instantly. Get photos, sign it. If you're forced to, our case will rely on the timeline. I signed. When I brought the papers down, Eleanor took them, her face relaxing. See? If you want a peaceful home, don't make a big deal out of small things. I watched her put the papers into a briefcase. My heart was cold, but it was no longer trembling. A few weeks later, the server system notified me of a strange access to the Riverbend Commons copyright folder late at night. The login was an internal admin account, not mine. I took screenshots, saved the log, and sent it to Mr. Franklin. Looking at the red notification on my screen, I understood that the stack of papers in my hands was no longer just for self-defense. It was my lifeline. Because when people dare to turn blank paper into a weapon, you have to hold on to enough light to show who is holding the handle. I discovered the first blank page had been turned into a weapon on a breezy afternoon. The server sent me an email notification about a change in access permissions. Ever since the strange late-night login, I had set up special alerts for any changes related to Riverbend Commons. I clicked it open. In the project's legal folder, a new file had just been uploaded. The file name was Contract for Transfer of Asset Rights for the Riverbend Commons Design. The uploader was an internal admin account. The timestamp was just after 11 p.m. the previous night. I downloaded the file and opened it. My eyes froze on the last page. My signature was there, Leah Sutton. The signature was mine, but I had never seen the content above it. The document stated that I agreed to transfer all asset rights for the Riverbend Commons design to Vanguard Architects, granting the company full rights to use, modify, publish, and exploit it without needing to credit my name in any promotional materials. I sat motionless. They didn't just want to steal my work. They wanted to use my own signature to prove that I had voluntarily erased myself. I took out the photos of the blank pages I had signed. The same signature placement, the same angle, the same distance from the edge of the paper. I saved a screenshot of the upload time and sent everything to Mr. Franklin. Less than 5 minutes later, he called. I just saw it. Yes. Stay calm. Don't call Julian. Don't go down to see Eleanor. Print out a copy, sign it with today's date to confirm when you discovered it, and back up the digital file in 2 different places. Mr. Franklin, they used my real signature. A real signature doesn't make a fake document real. The key is to prove the process. I hung up and followed his instructions exactly. I thought I had seen the depths of their depravity, but I was wrong. 2 days later, in the internal accounting inbox, I found a scanned copy of a shareholder resolution accompanied by a share transfer agreement. My name was at the bottom of the page again. The content stated that I had transferred 14% of my shares to Julian Rhodes. The transfer price was ridiculously low, with the justification being to rearrange the family governance structure. I read the new ratio. Julian Rhodes 47%, Leah Sutton 43%, Arthur Vance 10%. As long as Mr. Vance remained silent or was persuaded, Julian would control Vanguard. And I, the person who had contributed the most from day one, would be turned into a minority shareholder with a piece of paper I never agreed to. A dry laugh escaped my lips. In the Rhodes house, stealing from a family member was so normalized they had the audacity to call it rearranging. That afternoon, Julian called me into the CEO's office. You've seen the documents, haven't you? I closed the door. Are you talking about the copyright transfer contract or the share transfer agreement? His face was no longer soft. Leah, don't use such heavy words. Those documents are necessary for the company. You're my wife. If the company does well, you benefit too. I never transferred my shares to you. You signed it. I signed blank pages. Julian looked at me for a long time, then smirked. Can you prove that? That question confirmed everything. An innocent person would ask, what are you talking about? Only a guilty person would ask, can you prove it? I replied, you used to say we were one and the same. It turns out that one meant pasting my signature onto your wishes. He stepped closer. The client needs a single point of contact. The employees need a leader. The media needs a face. You're good at the technical side. I don't deny that. But without me, you're just someone sitting behind a computer. So you need me to sit behind a computer, but you don't need my name. What do you want? I want all the fraudulent documents to be rescinded. He laughed, so formal all of a sudden. You changed your heart just as quickly. Julian's voice dropped. Leah, don't push yourself out of this house. My mother isn't as soft as I am. I opened the door. I left this house in my heart a long time ago. It's just that today is the first time you've heard the door close. That night, Eleanor was waiting for me in the living room. She wore a brown silk pajama set, her hands fiddling with a string of prayer beads. Julian told me you were a little emotional about some paperwork. I stood before her. Do you know that those documents were created from blank pages I was forced to sign? She looked up. This family gave you a name, a chance to do big things. Now, over a few pieces of paper, you're going to turn around and bite the hand that fed you? I asked if you knew. She put the beads down on the table. So what if I did? So what if I didn't? You're Julian's wife. A husband and wife's assets should ultimately be in the husband's name to lead the way. A woman who holds on to too much power only causes family strife. My throat felt dry. You call creating contracts from blank pages leading the way? She shot up from her seat. Don't you dare lecture me. And remember this. A divorced woman who makes a scene is the one who suffers the most. Your reputation, your career, even the memory of your grandmother, can you protect any of it? At the mention of my family, I clenched my fists. Don't you bring my Nana into this. Eleanor scoffed. Then be smart. Get divorced quietly, take your share, and leave. If you want to make a scene, this family has plenty of ways to show the world what kind of ungrateful woman you are. Just then, Mila came down from upstairs, phone in hand. Mom, the new media post is scheduled. CEO Julian Rhodes and the journey to create a Riverside icon. We'll shoot a few more scenes of Julian with the Riverbend model tomorrow, and it'll be perfect. I looked at my smirking sister-in-law, then at Eleanor, then up toward the office where Julian had just threatened me. They had no intention of fixing anything. They were going to finish building their stage and use me as a shadow pasted onto the backdrop. That night, I drafted a separation agreement. It wasn't long, and it didn't list their sins. Just a few clear pages about the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, the separation of joint and separate assets, and that all disputes related to shares, copyrights, and company finances would be handled through independent legal proceedings. The next morning, I placed the agreement in front of Julian. He read it quickly. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Don't regret this later." "That's a line I should be saying to you." He signed it. So quickly that I realized how naive I had been to think he would ever try to stop me. For Julian, divorce wasn't losing a wife. It was the final step to legitimize pushing me out of both the house and the company. And that brought us to that rainy afternoon in the living room. The papers were signed. Eleanor had set her teacup down and told me to pack my things. I had walked out with my suitcase, Mr. Vance's car waiting outside, leaving that mansion behind forever. They had no idea they had just kicked out the only person holding the key to the truth. The next morning, I woke before the sun was fully up. In the small house in West Seattle, the only sounds were the kettle whistling and the scent of ginger tea rising in the air. I put on a light gray suit, tied my hair in a neat bun, and placed the folder in my briefcase. Before leaving, I stood in front of Nana Rose's photo. "Nana, today I'm not going to tell a sob story. I'm going to tell the truth." Mr. Franklin picked me up at the corner. Seeing me, he only asked, "Did you get any sleep?" I shook my head. "Even if I didn't, I can't let them see me shake." I gave a bitter smile. "My stomach is shaking, but I'm saving my face for them to see the blueprints." Mr. Franklin looked at me. "Today, you are not the ex-wife. You are the lead concept architect and a shareholder protecting her legal rights." Ethelred Group was headquartered in a glass tower downtown. I had been here before, standing behind Julian. Today, I walked in under my own name. Mr. Sterling received us in a small conference room. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and very sharp eyes. Beside him were his legal counsel and a technical expert. Mr. Sterling didn't beat around the bush. "Miss Sutton, I want to hear the main issue, not the family drama." I nodded. "Mr. Sterling, I am here because Riverbend Commons faces 3 risks. First, the copyright transfer document shows signs of being created from blank pages I was forced to sign. Second, the proposal currently being modified by Vanguard deviates from the spirit that won the concept round. Third, those modifications could affect the northern drainage system and the community spaces." I placed the original survey, site photos, email exchanges, and blueprints in front of him. Mr. Franklin added the photos of the blank pages, the email timestamps, and the newly appeared transfer contract. Mr. Sterling flipped through each page. Big business leaders are often like that. They don't believe you because you cry, nor do they yield because you're in pain. After a moment, he asked, "You claim to be the lead concept developer. So why does Vanguard's promotional material credit Mr. Rhodes as the author?" "Because I used to believe my husband's words that a husband and wife are one," I replied. "But the first sketch, the survey journal, the technical emails, and all the revisions have my timestamps. I am not asking Ethelred to take my side immediately. I am only requesting that you temporarily halt the design adjustments until an independent review can be conducted." Mr. Sterling looked at Mr. Franklin. "If what Miss Sutton says is true, this is more than just a marital dispute." Mr. Franklin replied, "Correct. We are not drawing legal conclusions here, but the developer needs to be aware of the potential risks to avoid damages." Mr. Sterling buzzed his assistant. "Get Vanguard over here this morning. I want to hear from both sides." Less than 2 hours later, Julian appeared. He wore a black suit, his expression so calm that an outsider would think I was the one causing trouble. With him were Eleanor, Mila, and Vanguard's lawyer, a man named Mr. Keene. The moment Eleanor walked in, she looked at me with faux sympathy. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. To think our family matters have affected your business." I sat quietly. Mr. Franklin gently placed his hand on my folder, reminding me not to take the bait. Julian spoke first. "Mr. Sterling, after our divorce, Leah has been emotionally unstable. I greatly respect her contributions to Vanguard, but her claims of forged documents are completely baseless." Mr. Keene placed a formally notarized set of documents on the table. "This is the copyright transfer agreement for the Riverbend design, signed by Miss Leah Sutton. This is the handover memorandum, this is the internal confirmation, and this is the family share restructuring agreement." Eleanor sighed. "My former daughter-in-law is a very sensitive person. For years, my family loved her like our own daughter. Now that their marriage is over, she's become irrational, trying to use the company to pressure Julian. Just yesterday, they demanded I pack up and leave, and today they were draped in the robes of victimhood. The Rhodes family truly didn't need a stage to act, just an audience. Mr. Sterling was not swayed by emotion. He asked, "Miss Sutton, your response?" Mr. Franklin stood up on my behalf. "We do not deny that the signature at the bottom of the page resembles Miss Sutton's. What needs to be clarified is when and how the content above the signature was created." He projected the photo of the blank page onto the screen. "This is the photo Leah sent me on the night she was asked to sign." The photo had the email timestamp, the signature placement, the wall clock, and Eleanor's diamond tennis bracelet in the frame. "We have the original email." Eleanor's face twitched. "Plenty of people have similar bracelets." Mr. Franklin didn't argue. "This is the creation data for the contract file. The file was created after the date written on the document, and the person listed as a witness on that day was in Portland, with flight tickets and a hotel receipt to prove it." Mr. Keene immediately countered, "Metadata can be altered. We need an independent forensic analysis. We can't just listen to one side." Mr. Sterling nodded. "Correct. That will require an independent party." Julian looked at me with a reproachful expression. "Leah, you are ruining the very project you helped create. What do you want? Money?" I spoke each word clearly. "I want you to stop using my signature to erase my name." The room went quiet for a few seconds. Mila let out a small laugh. "You transferred it to the company, so the company has the right to use it. Now you're coming back to demand credit? That's like selling something and then demanding the label back." I turned to Mila. "Mila, a design is not a dress you wear for a photo shoot and then return to the store. And an author's name is not a price tag for anyone to peel off as they please." Mila's face flushed. Eleanor cut in. "Mr. Sterling, my family doesn't want to argue. We just hope the project isn't affected by a private matter." Mr. Sterling steepled his fingers on the table. "A private matter that brings with it documentary risk is no longer private. As of today, Aethelred is temporarily halting the next phase of development with Vanguard related to Riverbend Commons. We will organize an independent review of the file ownership, the design lineage, and the technical changes." Julian's face fell. "Mr. Sterling, this decision will affect the timeline. A delayed timeline can be fixed. Using disputed documents is not so easily fixed." I exhaled softly. I hadn't won yet, but at least their stage lights had been forced off to check the wiring. As we were leaving the conference room, Mr. Vance called. His voice was steady. "Leah, I know Aethelred has paused the project, but that's not enough. You have to keep proving your case. I need to see a continuous chain of evidence." "Yes, Mr. Vance, I understand. Eleanor and Julian won't sit still." I glanced down the hallway. Julian was standing a few feet away. He waited for me to hang up, then walked over. "Are you satisfied now? Do you want to push me into a corner?" I looked at the man who was once my husband. That face once made me believe I had a home. Now it was just a beautiful but hollow wall. "I'm not pushing you, Julian. I'm just making you step off of my name, my work, and my signature." I hadn't even reached the bottom step of the Aethelred building when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, it was a few unknown numbers, then text messages, then a flood of links sent from former colleagues. I opened the first link. "Ex-wife of Vanguard CEO demands $2.8 million to let go of billion-dollar project." The headline hit me like a bucket of ice water. Below it was a photo of me getting out of Mr. Vance's black sedan. The shot deliberately zoomed in on the moment Mr. Vance helped me with my folder. With just one photo, they had managed to turn a former professor into a shady older man and a shareholder meeting into a sordid affair for public consumption. I scrolled down. The article quoted a clipped audio recording. "I need them to give me back what belongs to me." The sentence was originally part of my discussion with Aethelred about copyrights and shares, but stripped of its context, it sounded like I was naming my price. I stood in the middle of the lobby, feeling utterly chilled. Mr. Franklin walked over, glanced at the screen, and said immediately, "Don't respond." "But they're slandering me." "It's precisely because they're slandering you that you must not react the way they want. They need you to get angry, to write one wrong sentence, to call Julian and scream at him. Don't give them what they're fishing for." I swallowed hard. It's easy to say. Staying silent when you're being slapped in the middle of a marketplace is the hardest part. When I got back to my house in West Seattle, I went online. Mila had posted a long message on her personal page. She wrote about gratitude, about how some people are taken in by a family only to turn around and hurt those who loved them. Below, hundreds of comments jumped in with speculation. One account wrote, "This ex-wife has a shifty look." Another added, "When a woman gets mixed up with money, all decency goes out the window." I closed the laptop. People don't need to know who you are. A headline is enough for them to pass judgment. That evening, Julian posted. His writing style was as eloquent as ever, or rather, it was just like the writing I had edited for him for years. In some breakups, all you can hope for is to preserve a final shred of decency. I do not wish to speak ill of the woman who was once my wife. I only hope that a project built by hundreds of people is not turned into a tool for personal revenge. How brilliant. The man who used my signature to forge documents was now standing on a social media pulpit talking about decency. I called Mr. Franklin. I have the full audio recording. Keep it. Don't release it yet. But if I stay silent, people will think I'm guilty. Staying silent at the right time isn't an admission of guilt. It's conserving ammunition. If you fire everything today, they'll just change tactics tomorrow. Let them take a few more steps. I put the phone down. Outside, the potted rosemary trembled in the wind. I made myself a glass of warm water, sipping it slowly to calm my shaking hands. That night, things got worse. Around 11 p.m., the custom alert I set up sent a notification. The original design folder for Riverbend Commons on Vanguard's server was undergoing a mass deletion. I shot up and opened my laptop. The survey files from before May, the initial sketches, the technical minutes, the site photos, all were vanishing one by one from the shared directory. I took screenshots of every notification, downloaded the system logs, and saved a backup of the alerts to my hard drive. My hands were cold, but my mind was strangely clear. The next morning, Vanguard issued an internal memo, signed by Julian. After leaving the company, mislike an internal memo. Leah Sutton has shown signs of unauthorized access, copying, and destruction of data related to the Riverbend Commons project. The company is conducting a review to protect the interests of our clients and shareholders. I read the words destruction of data over and laughed. So, the person who was robbed was now being accused of breaking down the door. Less than an hour later, Eleanor called. I didn't answer. She sent a text in her familiar tone. "You have gone too far. Do you want to ruin our reputation in public?" I forwarded the message to Mr. Franklin. He replied, "Do not respond. Send a request to meet with the server provider." That afternoon, Mr. Franklin and I had a virtual meeting with the server provider. A technician shared his screen and opened the access logs. The delete command was executed at 2:17 a.m. The account used was Vanguard's internal admin account. The IP address was from the company's office. "Who manages that account?" I asked. "On the system, it's the IT department, but admin rights can be granted by executive request." Mr. Franklin noted every word. "Can you issue an official log and a technical confirmation?" "We can provide a written confirmation of the system data upon a valid legal request. But we have no authority to conclude who ordered it." I understood. The logs weren't enough to point the finger directly at Julian. They only proved I couldn't have been the one in the Vanguard office at 2 a.m. Deleting data, while my home security camera and phone location both showed I was at home in West Seattle. But it still wasn't enough to win. I called Leo, the engineer. The phone rang for a long time before he picked up. "Leah, I'm busy." "Leo, the drainage warning report you wrote was altered. I need you to confirm it." The line went silent. After a moment, he said very quietly, "Leah, please understand. I have a young child, and we have a mortgage. If I speak up, I'll lose my job and my family will be ruined." I didn't press him, but if something happens with the project later, they will ask why the engineer knew the risk and said nothing. He sighed heavily. "Give me more time." I hung up, my heart sinking. I wasn't angry with Leo. A person with a family often fears hunger more than being wrong, but his silence made my position more fragile. Late that afternoon, Mr. Vance called. "Leah, I've read Vanguard's memo. Julian says you deleted the data. How do you explain that?" I gripped the phone tightly. "I have offline backups and server logs showing the delete command came from the internal admin account at 2:17 a.m. from the company office. I was in West Seattle at the time. Do you have independent confirmation?" "We're working on it." Mr. Vance was silent. That silence was heavier than any reprimand. "Leah, I want to believe you, but to cast my vote, I need a more solid case. Julian has been sending me very thorough documentation." I closed my eyes. "I understand." I hung up and sat alone until evening. Outside, social media was still buzzing. Inside the company, Julian was painting me as a woman who was both demanding money and sabotaging the work. In the Laurelhurst mansion, Eleanor was probably telling relatives how her ungrateful ex-daughter-in-law had bitten the hand that fed her. I opened my private hard drive. The backups were still there. Every file, every photo, every email. The truth was still there, but it was being buried under mud. For the first time, I felt like I could lose. Not because I lacked evidence, but because they were dirtier than I had ever imagined. I stood up and drew the curtains. On the desk, the folder of evidence lay still. I placed my hand on it, feeling my heart slow down. Nana used to say, when things get chaotic, don't rush to fight every battle. Just let the dust settle, and the truth will reveal itself. I couldn't panic. If they wanted to drag me into the mud, I would make sure their footprints were clearly imprinted in it. I didn't have to wait for the mud to settle. The Rhodes family built a new stage for themselves. 3 days after the smear campaign, Eleanor hosted a party at the Laurelhurst mansion. The official reason was to thank friends and partners. In reality, she wanted to reassure minor shareholders, suppliers, and relatives that the House of Rhodes was still as solid as a rock. That afternoon, Mila started posting photos of imported flowers, long tables draped in white linen, fine wine, lobster, and roast duck. She wrote, "We weather every storm and come out stronger." I looked at the line and felt a sour taste in my mouth. A deep-rooted tree isn't afraid of the wind, but a tree growing on dirty money and lies can be washed away by a single rainstorm. That afternoon, Mr. Franklin called me to his office. On his desk was a new folder, a preliminary audit report from Aethelred Group, requesting Vanguard to explain its media expenses. Mila's contract had problems. I picked it up. The expenses for building leadership brand image, totaling nearly $490,000, had deliverables so thin they were unbelievable. A few online posts, a couple of short clips, and several mismatched invoices. Mr. Franklin said, "It's not enough to draw any conclusions yet, but it's enough to make the Rhodes family start looking for a scapegoat." Before I could ask, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Leah, I want to meet you. Alone. It's Mila." I looked at Mr. Franklin. He just said, "Not alone. Meet her here." With a camera and a witness. An hour later, Mila walked into the office. She wasn't wearing her usual heavy makeup. Her eyes were swollen, her hair hastily tied back, and she clutched her phone like a life raft. When she saw me, she flinched. Before, she had called me Leah with a dismissive tone. This time, her voice was barely a whisper. Leah. The name hung in the air, a reminder that some things, once broken, can never be the same. Mr. Franklin invited her to sit. "Miss Rhodes, what would you like to discuss?" Mila bit her lip, then opened her phone and placed it on the table. "My mother told me to take the fall for the media expenses." I looked at her. "Take the fall? What does that mean?" Mila laughed, but tears rolled down her cheeks. She said, "Julian is the CEO. He can't be implicated. If necessary, I should say the spending was my decision, that I signed off on it, that I broke protocol. She said, I'm a woman, I can get married and start over later. But if Julian goes down, the whole family loses everything." Mila's hand trembled as she played an audio file. Eleanor's sharp voice came out. "You signed most of the media contracts. You take responsibility, and I'll take care of it later." Then Julian's voice. "Mila, just take the heat for a little while. When this is all over, I'll make it up to you." Mila's voice in the recording was choked. "Make it up to me how? Can you give me back my reputation?" Eleanor cut in. "Your reputation is important, but your brother is the CEO. If his image tanks, the company's value drops, and we all lose everything." Mila stopped the recording, her shoulders shaking. "I used to think you were just trying to steal credit from Julian. I hated you because Mom said you were calculating. But yesterday, when she said that, I finally understood. In this family, if they need to, they'll use me as a stepping stone too." I looked at the girl who had once mocked me for being kicked out of the house. People only understand fire when their own clothes start to burn. I spoke slowly. "You are not innocent, Mila. You benefited from those contracts. You posted articles slandering me. You edited the audio clip." Mila nodded. "I know. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'll take responsibility for my part, but I won't die for Julian and my mother." Mr. Franklin pushed a statement form toward her. "If you are voluntarily providing this evidence, you must sign to confirm its origin, the time and circumstances of the recording, and you cannot post anything online from now on." Mila nodded immediately. I only added one thing. "If you want to be heard, Tell the truth. Don't add, don't subtract, and don't call me family to give yourself an out. Mila lowered her head. Yes, Miss Sutton. I didn't correct her. The old door was not going to be reopened. The next morning, the technical review at Athelred took place. Besides Mr. Sterling, there was the technical board, legal counsel, representatives from Vanguard, lawyers from both sides, and Mr. Vance. Julian walked in, still impeccably dressed, but with dark circles under his eyes. Eleanor sat in the waiting area. Mila was present as a provider of documents, her face pale. Mr. Sterling began. Today, we will only clarify the design lineage and technical risks. Whoever answers a question will be noted. The board questioned Julian first. Why was the senior wellness garden moved to the inner core, in direct afternoon sun, when the original plan placed it under the old trees? Julian replied, to optimize facility management and increase overall operational efficiency. Where is the survey data on senior citizen usage? Julian shuffled through his papers but couldn't find it. Another engineer asked about the northern drainage line. Julian said, the adjusted plan is still safe. The technical team approved it. I saw Leo Martinez, sitting at the end of the table, lower his head. Then it was my turn. I presented the original survey. I talked about the flood season, the old dock, the families who had lived by the river for 3 generations. I pointed out why the retention pond couldn't be shrunk, why the wellness garden had to be near the children's playground and the health clinic. I didn't need to say I was hurt. The drawing spoke for me. Julian interrupted. Leah is idealizing things. The project has to be financially viable. I looked at him. Financial viability isn't wrong. What's wrong is using it as an excuse to edit a risk warning into pretty words to fool the client. All eyes in the room turned to Leo Martinez. I thought he would stay silent again, but then he stood up. I'd like to make a statement. His voice was hoarse but clear. I previously sent an email warning that if the retention pond was shrunk and the northern drainage line was altered, the project would be at high risk for localized flooding during heavy rains. Afterwards, Mr. Rhodes instructed me to change the word risk to recommendation for landscape optimization because he was afraid of alarming the client. He opened his laptop and projected the original email onto the screen. The words were there in black and white. The air in the room froze. Julian jumped up. Leo, watch what you're saying. I only asked you to phrase it more gently. Leo looked Julian straight in the eye, his own eyes red. You told me that if I didn't change it and the project failed, I would be held personally responsible by the company. Mr. Vance closed his eyes, like a man who had just heard the crack of rotten wood under his feet. He instructed his secretary to record everything. After nearly an hour of further discussion, Mr. Sterling stood up. Athelred Group acknowledges Miss Leah Sutton as the developer of the original concept for Riverbend Commons, with survey records and technical bases that align with our initial requirements. The adjustments proposed by Vanguard contain technical and legal risks that need to be reviewed. As of this moment, we are suspending all work with Vanguard and opening a direct channel of communication with the professional team represented by Miss Sutton. Julian stood there, stunned. Mila bowed her head. I didn't feel lighter, just calmer. That evening, right at the height of the party at the mansion, the press release from Athelred was displayed on a large screen by a partner who wanted to ask Eleanor about it. The words, Miss Leah Sutton is the developer of the original concept appeared in the middle of the brightly lit living room. The laughter died down. Eleanor stood amidst the lavish feast, her face as white as a blank sheet of paper. The emergency shareholder meeting of Vanguard took place on a gloomy morning. I arrived early, wearing a navy blue suit, carrying the briefcase from my small house in West Seattle. The meeting room was full. Julian sat at the head of the table, with Eleanor behind him in a dark red dress. Mila was in a corner, head down. Mr. Vance sat to the left, his old fountain pen on the table before him. As I walked in, Eleanor shot up. How dare you show your face here? This company is Julian's life's work, not a place for you to leverage your divorce. I placed my briefcase on the table. I am here as a founding shareholder, a person protecting her legal 57% stake. Mrs. Rhodes. The formal address made her face harden. I used to call her Mom. That affection no longer had a place here. Julian tapped the table lightly. Leah, the transfer document has your signature. You only have 43%. I expect you to respect the facts. Mr. Franklin stood up. Then let's speak with evidence. He projected the photo of the blank page I took before signing onto the screen. The signature, the living room clock, and Eleanor's diamond tennis bracelet were all clear. Next to it was the time-stamped email I sent him that night. Then he showed the file creation data, proving the share transfer and copyright transfer contracts were created after I sent him the photo of the blank pages. Eleanor turned pale but still argued. Anyone can fake a photo. Mr. Franklin didn't argue back. He just showed the witness's file. The person listed as a witness was in Portland, with flight tickets and hotel receipts. And this, he continued, is the no documents being uploaded to the server from the Vanguard office. The server provider, attending virtually, confirmed that the command to delete the Riverbend Commons design folder happened at 2:17 a.m. from the internal admin account, after I had left the mansion and no longer had access to the office. That technical document was enough to demolish their accusation that I had deleted the data myself. Julian jumped to his feet. This is all just speculation. The company has many employees. Anyone could have used the admin account. Mr. Vance looked up. Then why, Julian, after the data was deleted, were you the first one to sign the memo accusing Leah of sabotage? Julian was speechless. For the first time, Mr. Vance hadn't called him son. The meeting room door opened, and Brenda, the head accountant, walked in, holding a folder. I am the chief accountant, and I would like to submit copies of the irregular contracts and cash flow records I have kept. Eleanor yelled, Brenda, do you remember who pays your salary? Brenda trembled but still placed the folder on the table. The company pays my salary, not you personally. She detailed the 3 main money trails. The consulting contracts with Anson Development, totaling $1.74 million with shoddy deliverables. Mila's media contracts, totaling $490,000 with mismatched invoices. And the funds that went through intermediaries to pay for Diane Palmer's condo, car, and luxury goods. The most damning was the money trail from Anson Development that was funneled through a personal account and then used to pay the mortgage on the Laurelhurst mansion. I turned to Eleanor. The day you kicked me out, you said every chair and cup belonged to the Rhodes family. So today, can you explain which accounts paid for this house? Eleanor's lips trembled, but she couldn't answer. Julian turned to me, his voice softening. Leah, we were once husband and wife. Do you really want to push me to the very end? I looked at him. Julian, I'm not pushing you. I'm just stopping you from standing on my name, my work, and my signature. Mr. Vance picked up his fountain pen. I once believed in Julian because he brought Vanguard to the market, but an architecture firm cannot be built on erased names, forged contracts, and deleted data. I am not voting out of sympathy for Leah. I am voting based on the evidence. Mr. Vance's vote sealed the fate of the game the Rhodes family thought they had won. The board of shareholders passed a resolution to suspend Julian's executive powers, order an independent audit of the entire company, freeze all data, review all related contracts, and forward any files showing signs of illegality to the proper authorities. Eleanor slumped into her chair. Mila burst into tears but didn't dare run to her mother. Julian stood in the middle of the room, his immaculate suit unable to hide his utter defeat. They say a hidden needle will eventually poke through the cloth. The Rhodes family had hidden a whole bundle of them, and in the end, they had torn their own bag of prestige to shreds. After that came the consequences. The bank froze its credit lines, partners withheld payments, and suppliers demanded their dues. Julian was removed as CEO, and Eleanor lost all influence at Vanguard. Mila had to take responsibility for the contracts she signed, but because she cooperated, she was spared from being the sole sacrifice. I didn't celebrate. That victory felt like pulling a thorn that had been lodged in my flesh for a long time. It was a relief, but it still hurt. I restructured Vanguard, renaming it Cornerstone Architects. Talented people were kept on, and paying the back wages of the technical team was the first priority. Every new project had to clearly credit the lead designer, the surveyor, the concept developer, and the implementation team. On the wall of the conference room, I hung a single sentence. Those who create value must stand beside their name. Sometime later, Eleanor fell ill. Julian came to see me, his face devoid of its former polish. My mother wants to see you. I went. The woman who had kicked me out of a mansion now lay in a small rented room, her hair white, her hands shaking. She choked out the words, I was wrong. I built Julian up on your work, and turned our whole family into a fake stage. I didn't cry, nor did I feel any satisfaction. Eleanor, I can help with medical expenses out of human decency, but I cannot help anyone escape the consequences of their own actions. A few years later, the riverfront park phase of the Riverbend Commons project was completed. The old trees were still there, The wellness garden was filled with seniors doing their morning exercises, and the open-air library was full of children's laughter. On the dedication plaque, the words Lead Architect, Leah Sutton and the Cornerstone Architects team were clearly visible under the sun. A young intern asked me, "Ma'am, I only did a small part of the survey. Does my name really need to be included?" I smiled. Yes. If you did the work, your name must stand beside it. In life, kindness is precious, but kindness without boundaries can easily become a bridge for others to walk all over you. As a wife, as a partner, it is good to be patient and accommodating, but never let anyone hold your name, your talent, or the power to decide your own life for you.